Hello, welcome to Shad Life. We are in a familiar place and I am on the Poseidon Norton. This bike looks good. It's definitely a more progressive looking bike, kind of longer, slacker, so on and so forth. Advent X derailleur, pretty low end square taper crank, and then it's got like a all steel cassette. When I bought Advent X stuff aftermarket, the outer ring was aluminum. It had aluminum carrier and stuff like that, so they definitely have a more budget cassette on there, which is going to be heavier, and so on and so forth. Coil fork, I've already like kind of pushed on it a little bit. It's a kind of a pogo sticky fork again because it's just not an air fork. It doesn't even have a rebound adjust. I tried to find one. I didn't realize it doesn't have rebounds. You can't slow it down, so it just kind of pogo sticky, but we'll talk about it when I'm riding on the trail. So I know I like Advent X. I've used it before. It's only 10 speed, so it's a 1x10, but it's got pretty decent range, and I know it shifts well and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of just a quick overview. And if you watched my video where I unboxed it and put it together, I talked about quite a few things, so I'll link that right up in the corner here right now. But one of the things I'm very curious about, probably the thing I'm the most curious about on this bike, are these brakes. Yes, they are cable actuated hydraulic brakes. So you have a cable starting there going up to your lever, so that's more traditional, right? And these are big bulky levers, the kind I hate. See how far I have to move them in just so I can one finger them, but much easier to change out because they're not hydraulic up here, so I could just use a standard brake cable and change out to, so maybe some Avid levers or something that I like a little more. But then down here we have the hydraulic caliper. So very interesting. I'm curious. It looks like there's an adjustment knob there, which I don't necessarily know what that does. Maybe it adjusts how quickly they actuate and stuff. So same thing on the rear. If these brakes work well, I'm going to be pretty excited about it. So it's time to get this bike on the trail. Because I don't have a dropper, I'm going to keep it over here in the north loop of Theodore Worth, because this is Theodore Worth. If you watch my channel, you'll know I test bikes here a lot. Sticking with the north loop, and I'll probably do this loop which is right behind me. I might go hit like area 36 or something if I'm feeling up for it, and talk about this bike. I don't want to go over to the southwest loop where there's jumps and stuff, because I'm just not comfortable jumping with the seat super high. I've gotten so used to a dropper that will not be any fun. So we'll get an initial impression on this bike, and then I'm going to throw a dropper on here. I also think I'm going to throw a shorter stem. I just want to ride the bike in its stock form to talk about it, what it's like stock. Because when I sit on the seat, the axle is behind the handlebars for me, and that's one of those indicators that the handlebars are too far out there. So I'm going to throw a 35mm stem on here and a dropper post, and then I'll go out and get this bike into some more gnarly stuff. All right, might even get to see Monarch. We will see. All right, let's go hit the trail. Okay, so I can already tell this bike's pretty slack in these tighter turns, and the handlebars are pretty high up, and they're not even that high of a rise bar. The stack height on this bike is really tall, which, to be honest, is kind of nice. I like the high front end on this bike. it's pretty wild. I could probably even swap these spacers around, lower it a small amount. And I have to keep in mind, no dropper, so I have to deal with the seat always in its up position. Let's hit these rocks on the downhill. Keep in mind. There's some funny feeling with this bike, and it's because the stem is too long. It is just way too long. So when I change out some of the stuff, like a shorter stem, then it'll feel more like how a long slack bike should feel. But right now, it's kind of like a cross-country spec long slack bike. It's got a 60mm stem, 2.35 tires, so a much skinnier tire than you'd normally expect on a trail bike. Things like that. So let's just jump right into contact points. Contact points are your feet, your hands, and your, what do we want to call it? Hiney, tuchus, butt. So those are important things on a bike, like how does it feel in the different contact points. So grips are actually pretty decent. I like them. They're soft, they grip. Oh. And so on and so forth. I hear some rattling, and I think I need to check and make sure I have the clutch set in the on position for the rear derailleur. I'll do that in a minute. But back to contact points. The seat is actually really comfortable. Like, it is probably one of the most comfortable seats I've ever seen come on a stock bike. I don't know what seat it is, but it's got that hollowed out middle, and it's flat, it's wider, it is comfortable. And thirdly, the pedals. Now you'll notice in the unboxing I showed you the plastic pedals, but I decided to put them on anyway rather than throw on a better pair of pedals. And they actually grip fairly well. I actually decided I'm going to wear my Vans instead of my 510s, because when I'm riding my BMX bike, I have plastic pedals with plastic pins, very much like these, and I wear my Vans, and I like the amount of traction I have. It's not as grippy as 510s with metal pins, but it's pretty grippy. Grippy enough. It's not like scary or anything. So if you're one of these people that wear like a running shoe or something on your mountain bike, you're gonna get shin hacks and slip pedals all the time. You definitely want appropriate shoe to grip the pedal, and in this case the Vans BMX shoe or a skater shoe works great. So I reluctantly decided to take the rugged dump loop here on this bike without a dropper post. I'm not going up there. Oh god. All right, let's ride this skinny up here. Oh, no dropper. God. Oh, this is definitely mandatory. I get why a bike doesn't come with a dropper in this price point, but still. I'm having to get used to the longer stem, but I think I'm getting the hang of it here. It's weird because I tend to oversteer. I don't know why. On a slack bike, that shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, I knew these tires wouldn't cut it. Okay, I need to try to explain this to you, why it feels so funny. So I know the stem isn't like crazy long, but the way this bike rides, it's a slack bike, so 65-degree head angle, and it's got a 60mm stem, and that combination makes this bike feel like when I'm steering, instead of going like this, I feel like I'm going like this, like side to side, instead of like this, like this. That's how it feels. It's very awkward. So it wouldn't cost Poseidon any more money to put a 35mm stem on here, or 40mm, whatever, right? Like that would make this bike feel completely different. Just that one change, this bike would feel way nicer to ride. But right now it feels kind of funky. I also am surprised they put such skinny tires on here. These are something I'd expect to see on a cross-country bike, and not even like, these tires are outdated. These came out like in the late 2000s, mid or late 2000s, and there was a small block 8 out at the time, and I used to swear by small block 8s back then. But these tires, these slant 6s, they're not cutting it very well on these trails, and these are hard pack but kind of with a loose top surface, and they're a little sketchy, and I'm not 100% sure the sketchiness I'm feeling is the tires or the steering. I'm not sure, but there's just definitely doesn't feel right up front here. So that's, you know, riding this bike out of the box. Let me get on the trail and I'll keep talking about this. So I know bikes enough that when I was buying this bike, I even said that stem is too long for the geometry of a bike, and I knew it like right off the bat. I even said I didn't think I would even ride the bike with the long stem, but to do a proper review, I actually need to ride the bike in its pure stock form out of the box. So that's what I'm doing. But all future rides are going to have a few changes, just so I can feel comfortable enough on the bike to shred it a little harder, because that's what you all want to see. And I just don't feel comfortable doing that the way this bike is set up right now. So now that I got that stuff off my chest, let's talk a little bit about like the suspension. It's not as bad as I was expecting. So I don't know if this fork is a step up from the one that came on the Grand Canyon 5, which was also a SR Sun Tour fork, but this fork feels stiffer. It's not like flexy, and the suspension works pretty good. All right, I'm gonna reluctantly go over the big rock. Oh gosh, yep. So I'm too far forward over the front wheel coming down the backside. So the fork so far has impressed me. Its weight certainly doesn't. It is a heavy fork, like unbelievably. Like when I go to pick up the bike, the front end is way heavier than the back end, and that's not normally the case, especially when you're dealing with steel cassette that's pretty heavy and stuff like that. But suspension wise, like coming off those rocks and stuff, it doesn't feel like a pogo stick. And that was kind of my initial gut feeling, is that it would feel that way, but it actually kind of has a slow return naturally, even though there's no rebound adjustment. It doesn't just rebound really strong back, which gives it a much better feel. Yep, not a bad fork. Heavy, but it feels okay. So I just went over a little like kind of stump thingy that's on the trail and I heard the spokes make noise, so that means that the wheels might not be very well tensioned, so I should definitely check that and make sure that the spokes are tight enough, because for somebody who just buys a new bike, it's not something they're gonna think to check, and their spokes will come loose, and if that happens, then it's really easy to bend a rim. So there's definitely some quality control that needs to happen for this bike. We always have to keep what we paid in perspective, but now I have something to compare it to. The Grand Canyon 5, and that was even cheaper by a few $100s, and it definitely came better equipped, with the exception of not having boost spacing and through axles. But aside from that, it was better built. Speaking of the Grand Canyon 5, they have a Grand Canyon 7, and that bike, from what I read, has through axles and stuff. It's still that XC geometry. I'm very curious to know. Oh, no dropper post. You'll hear me say that over and over again. If that's going to be available in the US, because I noticed it's available overseas, but I haven't seen it available in the United States. Just the Grand Canyon 5. But I think that Grand Canyon 7 looks pretty nicely spec'd. And if they offer it in the US, I will definitely try to get my hands on it. So let's talk about the brakes so far. Like, I did the bed in out in the street in front of my house, and you know, they kind of started to work better, and I just figured, well, as I'm out on the trail, they'll gradually improve, and they seem to be, but they're taking their time. Like, I'm grabbing, the front seems to be starting to grab a little better. But what's funny is at about this point right now, these brakes work about as good as the brakes ever did on the Polygon after me monkeying with them all a bunch. Those textural brakes on the Polygon are getting my the ranking of worst hydraulic brakes ever that I've ever ridden with. And these, this early on, are about equal to what those were, but we'll see if they break in, bed in a little better and get improved. And if they do, it's really neat that it's a cable actuated hydraulic brake. I'm really curious about how this bike will feel when I set it up the way that I want it set up, because I think this frame is going to be pretty nice. It feels pretty good. I'm trying to, you know, get a feel for how it would be, yes, when I have like a 35 millimeter stem and so on and so forth. It's gonna be shreddable, pretty sure. Dropper post. I don't even like jumping with the seat right there. Okay, there it is. First ride on the Poseidon. That was interesting. I've talked about it a bunch during the video, but I definitely want to throw a shorter stem on here. I feel, and then drop it down maybe a spacer or two. I feel like I'll get a much better feel of what this frame should feel like and be like. And then I absolutely need to throw a dropper on here so I can jump it and do the normal things that I like to do. I'm way too far forward over the front end with this longer stem, and it makes the bike a little unnerving for me, and I don't feel like I can just get super rowdy with it. What I find interesting is, like, this is a really aggressive geometry on this frame, and I feel like Poseidon set it up like an XC bike. Like, it makes me wonder if they really understand like what they're doing. It's you know, reading on their website, it's like it sounds like they copied a more aggressive geometry of other bikes, which is fine. Do that. Like I think of the Santa Cruz Chameleon or something, right? Nothing wrong with doing that, but then you need to spec the bike like one of those bikes would be spec'd. Which that's the part I find kind of interesting. So I'm gonna want to swap some parts out and get this bike to be more like what it should be. And the 27.5 by 2.35 tires just aren't aggressive enough and rowdy enough. Again, this is more of an XC type of tire, and it's actually a really old school. The Slant 6 is a popular tire a long time ago, but there's been a lot of tire technology and so on and so forth since this tire came out. A wider tire, you know, shorter stem, kind of a more aggressive stance, dropper post. I understand why they don't put a dropper post on a bike at this price point. That I'm gonna forgive them, but why they don't put like a 35 or 40 millimeter stem on here, I don't know. That wouldn't cost any extra to do such a thing. So there you have it. Fork feels okay, but it's really, really, really heavy, and it makes the whole front of this bike feel heavy. The brake levers are pretty thin, so it's a lot of pressure on my finger. The nicer levers are flatter here, so they feel better on your finger. Things like that. The brakes feel pretty decent. They're starting to feel like they're getting pretty broken in. Looking at the rotors there, they're starting to get nice and broken in, but I can see they got a little bit more to go to get fully broken in. And I have a feeling these brakes are going to be pretty sweet. I'm excited about this idea of a cable actuated hydraulic brake, and these brakes already are working better than those Tektro hydraulic brakes that came on the Polygon Siskiyou T8. So there is that. Again, square taper, kind of low end crankset, things like that. Certainly what I would say an XC equipped aggressive hardtail, which is not the way you want to do an aggressive hardtail frame like this. So let's do the frame up right, spec it with the right parts, and then I'll give this thing a true test, take it to some jumps, shred it, and then we'll see how I like it. I appreciate your support from my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.